Now that you've had the opportunity to explore our Expert Voices series so that you can learn something about what different audiences want and how professionals who engage with these audiences think about engaging with them, the next question to think about is what you want to accomplish when you're communicating about science. So, this whole section is about trying to figure out what your goal is in communication. So, there are lots of different types of goals in science communication and public engagement. One really common goal that we hear about and relate all the time is eliciting excitement or curiosity about science or the scientific process. This happens a lot, especially in informal science learning environments like science museums. Another common goal, is to share scientific research or to share something about the process of doing science or to share about some particular topic in science so that you can open up a dialogue with your audience of interest. But then there are other types of goals too, which might be a little bit less about sharing or eliciting excitement and more about convincing people to change something. So, for instance, an example of this would be to try to convince a legislator or a policymaker to either support or block a bill, or in sort of a broader health context, to convince people to change a health related behavior. There are lots of other types of goals, and we're not trying to tell you what goal you should define, but rather to just think about how you want to intentionally set your goal so that you can accomplish what it is that you want to when you have the opportunity to interact with your target audience. So let's highlight again that there are two different types of goals. There are audience goals and there are speaker goals. And audience goals could be something as easy as they're just curious and they want to learn something new. It could be that they're interested in applying some kind of science research to a problem, and it might honestly be that they just are interested in discussing a controversial issue with someone who has some degree of understanding about that issue. And so, again, I want to emphasize that speaker goals are different from those. And speaker goals can be congruent or incongruent with audience goals. So, I've listed a few congruent speaker goals for the audience goals above. So, some of these could include sharing your research or your latest research, which might be congruent with an audience goal of learning something new. You might want to raise awareness of a problem or a solution that your research addresses, which is congruent with the idea of applying research to a problem. And just as congruently, you as a speaker might want to discuss a controversial issue because you have expertise that's relevant to weigh in. So the point here is that if we can make audience and speaker goals align, then that's the most effective way of trying to make sure that communication is effective. And I would argue that that also, as a speaker, helps you to determine what your goal is or what a good goal is for you. And what I mean by that is let's use an example to talk about this. Successful science communication happens when your audience's goals and your goals are aligned. So, for example, if you're communicating in an informal environment, say in a science museum, you might be trying to get youth to get excited about science topics or to teach them something about a specific particular science area. This goal probably aligns pretty well with why those youth are in the science museum in the first place. So when they go to a science museum, most of the time, kids want to be engaged with interesting ideas. They want to play, they want to learn. So those goals, your goal to share that information and for kids to learn, are congruent. But say instead that what you really wanted to do is to convince people to call their legislators to support a bill funding something like medical research. Then communicating in a science museum with a youth audience is probably not the best fit because they're in that space for different reasons. They have different goals for being in that space than you do, and your goals aren't congruent. And also, let's be honest, they're probably too young to vote. So the challenge that I'd like to ask of you now is to define what your communication goal is. What do you want to accomplish with your science communication effort? And what does that tell you about the type of audience that you might want to interact with? So take a minute, think about it, write it down, and then check it against your audience profile to determine whether or not you chose the right audience and if that goal is congruent with the types of things that they might want.